In this video, we'll be going over a complete maintenance guide for your Vortex Crystalline RO water filtration system. Before starting maintenance, you'll want to perform 3 functions. The first being, locate your cold water angle stop adapter and turn your angle stop adapter off. This will stop water production from feeding the machine. Then go to your storage tank and turn off your storage tank valve. That will make sure when you're doing maintenance, water is not dispensing from your storage tank. Then go up to your faucet and open your faucet. A slight amount of water will be dispensed from the faucet. Wait till that stops and then close the faucet. What that does is relieve the pressure built up in the machine and then closes the loop so you can begin maintenance. This will ensure little to no leaking will happen as you disconnect filtration components. To begin general maintenance, I normally like taking the machine out from underneath the sink, but it all depends on how it was installed. Sometimes not enough tubing was put under the sink in order for you to do that, but if you have that luxury, I would do that first. Now that you've removed the machine from under the sink and it is in a more easily workable area, you can begin maintenance. You'll start, of course, with your first 2 filters, your pre-filters, which are behind your crystal chamber and your vortex chamber. You'll then move to your RO membrane, filters 4 and 5, your post-filtration, and finally, your final polishing coconut carbon. Before we begin, it's important to know how tubing and fitting components work on the machine. So, traditionally, tubes are going to be securely fastened. When you look at a fitting, you'll see this collar at the top. Unless the collar is depressed against the fitting, as you see there's no more gap, the tube won't come out. But once you depress that collar, the tube will be released. When putting a tube back into a fitting, you'll first feel some resistance, and then you will move past that resistance towards the second wall, and now the tube is completely seated. Again, you have to depress that collar against the fitting in order to release the tube. If that collar is not depressed towards the fitting, the tube will not be removed. Another thing to note for easier installation is fitting orientation and label. Each filter should be labeled 1, 2, 4, 5, and 9. 3 is your RO membrane that will actually go inside your RO membrane housing and not be completely swapped out. When installing filters, if you seem to forget which way the filter is supposed to go, you can use fitting orientation or also flow arrows marked on every filter. Now we can begin filtration maintenance. I always start with filters 1 and 2, your pre-filters, which are again, number 1 is behind your crystal chamber, number 2 is behind your vortex chamber, the clear chamber. They're fastened by filter clips, and the front filters can easily just be popped off the clip and moved up and out of the way. Then you remove your filter clips, and you can begin to take number 1 and number 2 off of the machine. All you would do is again depress the collar against the lines and remove the tubes. The bottom tube connecting filter 1 and 2 will be saved and used to connect the new 2 filters that will replace these. Once those tubes have been removed from the tops of filter 1 and 2, they can also just be pulled away from the filter clips and filter board and taken off of the machine. Remember to save that bottom tube because they will be used to put the new filters on. Again, use the identifying markings to make sure you have the right filters and save that tube from the original filters so you can connect number 1 and number 2 back together before putting it back on your filter board. Now that we've connected filter 1 and 2 by the tube from the previous filters, you can simply press them firmly towards your filtration board with the clips and they will snap right into place. You can then put your top tubes in place and remember to push past the first resistance to the second wall. If you feel like you need to redo the tube adjustment, just depress that collar to pull your tube out and reinsert. Once those filters are in place, grab your filter clips, reattach them by firmly pressing onto your filters. And once that is done, reattach your crystal chamber and your vortex chamber by firmly pressing them against those clips. The next filter we'll be replacing is your RO membrane, which is not labeled due to not being able to put a number sticker on the actual membrane itself, but it will be going in your membrane housing that has the pressure gauge attached, is connected by an orange feed tube below, a discharge blue tube and check valve above going to the left, and a drain valve in black going down. You'll need to remove all three tubes, the black drain tube, the blue product tube, and the orange feed tube, in order to remove the membrane from the filter board and begin replacing your membrane. In order to do that, it's usually easier to, once again, pop the housing away from the filter board and begin removing those tubes by simply depressing the collar and removing the tube. The RO membrane housing is usually the filter that will leak the most, so make sure you have a towel handy. Once you've removed all three of those tubes, you can take the membrane off of the filter board and begin to remove your filter housing cap. You can remove this cap with a strap wrench, a very large pipe wrench, or some people use an oil filter wrench. You can use the ribs on the cap to help you get it off. And once you do, you'll simply be removing the membrane inside. I often use this plastic stem right here to grip on and remove it, and just make sure you put the membrane back into the housing in the same orientation it comes out in. It really only goes in one way, so it shouldn't be a problem. Once you've replaced the membrane into the membrane housing and fastened the cap back on, you must reattach all three tubes to the membrane housing. Don't be worried on messing these up, it's very intuitive. Your product line is going to go intuitively into the fitting pointing left. Your drain line will go intuitively in the fitting pointing down. And your orange feed line is going to be going intuitively in the fitting in the back where the line is resting. Do those three things and you've replaced your membrane. After replacing your membrane and reattaching all three tubes, your blue product, black waste, and orange feed, make sure that all tubes are seated properly, that you've pushed past your first wall of resistance to your second wall. We will now be changing filters 4 and 5, which are behind your last two crystal chambers. 4 is behind the one on the left, and 5 is behind the one on the right. The only difference in changing these two opposed to the numbers 1 and 2 is number 5 actually has a stem fitting on the top. So when you remove this fitting to get number 5 away and off of the filtration board, it will actually look like this. It won't be a fitting where you're putting a tube inside, it will be a stem fitting where your pH adjust valve will be the fitting you pull off and put back on when you change out your number 5 filter. Just like your number 1 and 2 filter that had the orange tube connecting them both, your number 4 and 5 have a tube and fitting connecting them both, a blue tube and a T fitting. Make sure those are saved to reattach the new number 4 and number 5 filters. For changing number 4 and 5, begin by pulling firmly your crystal chambers off. Sometimes the clips come with them, and that's a lucky win. Move them up and out of the way so you can get to your 4 and 5 filters. Start by removing your top tubing and your top pH adjust fitting from 4 and 5. And remember to save this fitting and tube assembly so those two filters can be put back together properly. Once you've detached 4 and 5 from the tubes and the filtration board, you should be left with your pH adjust fitting, your blue tube that was entering filter 4, and your T fitting tubing assembly that will connect 4 and 5. With your new 4 and 5 in place, you'll reattach the blue tube entering filter 4, making sure you push past that first wall, hitting your second, and replace the pH adjust valve onto the stem that is entering filter 5. Once you do that, you'll reattach your T and tube fitting assembly to connect 4 and 5 at the bottom. Once you've completed that, replace your filter clips onto filter 4 and 5. And reattach your crystal chambers right on top. Firmly press them on, and you've changed 4 and 5. You'll now change the last filter, number 9, your coconut polishing filter. When changing your final filter, filter number 9, your coconut carbon polishing filter, you'll simply remove your entry tube and your exit tube by depressing the collar and pulling the tubing out, and replace it with your number 9 replacement filter. The arrow indicating flow can help you make sure you orientate the filter properly, as well as the elbow fitting being on one side and the straight fitting being on one side. Once the tubes have been disconnected, simply pull firmly away from your filter board, removing filter number 9, and replace with your replacement number 9 filter. Resecure the inlet and outlet tubes, and you finish replacing all filters on your machine. Now that all filters have been replaced on the machine, I would go around and recheck every fitting that you've adjusted and manipulated during maintenance. Make sure that every single one has been inserted properly and fully to their second wall to ensure no leaks upon start. After you've made sure all tubes have been replaced and fastened accordingly, you can move your system back into the cabinet and reattach any hardware that you may have unscrewed to get it out. One thing to know, because this is a demo system, this fitting has no tubing and the tank has no tubing. Normally on the system you have under your sink, this fitting will have a green line coming from it going into your storage tank. So if you're looking at this wondering what's going on, don't be worried. Now that all filters have been changed, you can begin your startup procedure. Start by going above the sink and opening your faucet. This will make sure that nothing builds up pressure in the machine when we turn it on, and air and water will be dispensed from your faucet. Then go to the bottom and open up your drain valve. This is connected to your RO membrane drain assembly. What that will allow is when you turn the machine on, air and excess water will be sent down the drain rather than through the system. This will help us expel any extra air built into all the filters that we've just replaced. Then go to your angle stop adapter connected to your cold water line and slowly open this up, starting about a quarter to halfway. You'll hear rushing water going down your drain and entering the machine. After about 30 seconds, you can completely open it all the way and wait about 3 to 5 minutes. This will be much louder than normal production because we've opened our drain valve assembly, allowing the majority of the water to go down the drain. Once this is done for about 5 minutes, you can then close your drain valve assembly and move to the next step of startup. The next step of startup is simply waiting. You'll wait about 10 minutes, sometimes less, sometimes more, for water to travel all the way through the brand new filters and out of your water faucet. Wait until you have a light but steady stream with no breaks in your water filtration faucet. And remember, all while this is going on, we still have not touched the tank. That valve should still be in the closed position. Once you have a slight stream being produced from your water filtration faucet, you can close this faucet. What we're now doing is allowing the brand new filters and the machine itself to build with water. Once it builds pressure and fills all the way up, it will shut itself off. You'll notice that happens by one, noticing the noise stopping, which indicates it's no longer taking in water, but also your pressure gauge will go from registering what your house pressure is feeding the machine to about halfway or sometimes all the way to zero. This lets us know the machine has built pressure, your auto shutoff mechanism has engaged, and it stopped taking water on. Once this is done, you'll want to wait about 2 to 3 minutes, and as long as your pressure gauge does not kick back on and you do not hear excess water being brought onto the machine, that means the machine is holding pressure and staying off, meaning you have no leaks. Once this occurs and you realize you have no leaks and the machine is holding pressure, go up to your faucet, open it, and relieve some of that water and pressure. You'll suddenly hear your system start taking water on again, and the pressure gauge will rise to your house pressure. This is letting you know the auto shutoff mechanism has read your low pressure reading by removing water from the machine, and it is now taking on water again. Go up to the faucet, close it, and allow that process to happen again. The system will build pressure, fill all the way up, your auto shutoff will engage, your pressure gauge will drop, and you will no longer hear water being produced. This is how we check for leaks over time. We'll do this process 3 to 5 times. It only takes a few minutes each time, just to ensure you have no leaks, allowing the water to be dispensed, drop pressure in the unit, and then allowing it to close and build pressure in the unit, making that auto shutoff mechanism engage over time, telling you you have no leaks and everything was changed properly. Once you've done that 3 to 5 times, it's now time to get the tank back in the picture. Go to your storage tank and open your storage tank valve. Again, this is normally connected to a green tube that's going to this fitting right above your pH adjust. Once the tank is in play, you can open up your faucet and you'll notice a much higher volume of water and a much stronger stream being dispensed from the faucet. You can leave that open until the tank is completely empty. That will take about 10 minutes. What we want to do is drain this tank all the way down with the water that was in there before we began maintenance. Once the tank has been completely drained down and your faucet up above is no longer producing a heavy flow of water, again, this will take about 10 minutes, you can close the faucet and begin allowing your system and tank to start filling. You've now finished your startup process, and we now need to begin your flushing process. Flushing process is very simple. You simply wait. Wait 1 hour to allow the tank to fill all the way up. When it does, you'll notice 2 things. 1, your system will no longer be making the noise of producing water, and also your pressure gauge will have dropped to below house pressure or all the way to 0. Once that's done, you can go up above your sink and open your faucet. Again, allow to drain for 10 minutes, and that will empty your storage tank. Once it's empty, you can close it and allow it to fill 1 more time. We flush the system twice, and on the 3rd fill, you can start drinking the water. After you've allowed the tank to fill for its 2nd time, waiting 1 hour, you'll then hear the system no longer produce water. Your pressure gauge will drop to below house pressure or all the way to 0. You'll open your faucet and let it drain for 10 minutes, and then close it to allow the process to begin again. Except this time, on the 3rd fill, you'll be able to drink that water. You've now completed turning off the machine, turning off the tank, changing the filters, startup process, flushing process, and you're now ready to drink water. You've completed every step and are ready to drink your fresh Vortex crystalline water. Good job and enjoy.